Hello, so I wanted to do a video today on finding the prime factors of a number and then using those to find the highest common factor and lowest common multiple of a pair of numbers. So I've got 4 different difficulty level questions which we'll get to in a second, but just before we do, as always, I try and just give you some areas that you need to be comfortable with before you have a go at these questions. So number 1 is factors and multiples. So you need to remember a factor is a number that goes into a number, whereas a multiple is a number in the times table. You need to know what a prime number is. I've listed the first few there. Quite often in school you're taught that a prime number is a number that's only divisible by 1 and itself. However, I don't particularly like that definition because 1 is not a prime number and 1 is divisible by 1 and itself. So that definition doesn't really work for all numbers, all prime numbers, sorry. So a better definition is a prime number is a number that has exactly 2 different factors. So for example, number 2, 3, 5, 7, this list of prime numbers, all of those have exactly 2 different factors. If I took 7 as an example, you could get that by doing 1 times 7. 1 is not a prime number because the 2 factors it has are going to be 1 times 1 and they're factors. So I prefer that second definition. You also need to have a good understanding of Venn diagrams and indices as well. Venn diagrams, you can do some of this work without Venn diagrams, however the more tricky questions will require you to use them. So 4 different questions. You need to be able to express a number as a product of its prime factors. So remember, a product is what we get when we multiply numbers together. So for example, the product of 2 and 3 is 6. The product of 5 and 10 is 50. And then prime factors, that's factors that are prime numbers. So the way we're going to do this question, and I've written the prime numbers over on the right hand side here just to help us out. So the way you're going to do this is what we call a prime factor tree. So you're thinking of any 2 numbers, they don't necessarily have to be prime, that multiply together to give you 360 in this case. So I'm going to start, that number ends in a 0. That tells me it divides by 10. So I'm going to do 10 and 36. Now, it doesn't have to be 10. You could have done 2 and 180. You could have done 4 and 90. It doesn't matter. You will eventually get the same answer. So if these numbers here are not prime, we are going to break them down again. And we're going to keep going until everything's prime. So 10 we can get by doing 2 and 5. Now, every time you reach a prime number, i.e. a number in this list over, where's my mouse gone? Over here, you're going to circle that number. So 2 is a prime number, 5 is also a prime number. We are now going to stop the tree there. We're not going to do any more there. However, 36 is not a prime number, so I'm going to break that down again. 6 times 6. Neither of those are a prime number, so I'm going to break that down into 2 and 3. Because they are prime, I'm just going to circle those, and that branch of that tree stops there. And then I'm going to do the same over here. That's going to be 2, that's going to be 3. Both of those are prime numbers. Now, I haven't actually mentioned this last bit. Give your answer in index form. Before we do that, I'm just going to write out 360 is equal to, and then you tend to put these numbers in order, the circled numbers at the bottom of your tree diagram, your prime factor tree. So I'm going to put them in ascending order. That means the smallest number first. So I'm just going to cross them off as I go, just to make sure I don't put any extras or miss any out. So 2 times 2 times another 2, and then times 3 times 3 and times 5. I have seen students put a plus in between rather than a times. Remember, a product is what we get when we multiply numbers together, so it has to be a times. Okay, the index form bit means you're going to be using powers or indices. So instead of 2 times 2 times 2, I could write 2, 360 equals 2 to the power of 3. And then I've got two threes, so that's going to be 3 squared. And then I've got 1 5, which is just 5. You might see this sometimes written as 5 to the power of 1. It's unlikely. When I give you the question generator at the end, I wasn't able to get rid of that 1. So it means the same thing. If you ever see 5 or 5 to the power of 1, it means the same thing. Okay, so we've now expressed 360 as a product of its prime factors. That's our answer. Okay. Next one is finding the highest common factor and lowest common multiple of two numbers. If these numbers were nice and low, let's say I had, for example, 20 and 15, and I asked you to find the highest common factor, what we could do is list the factors of 20. So factors of 20 come in pairs. So 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5, and then I'm just going to write these out in order. 1, 2, 4, 5, 10 and 20. And then I could do the same for the factors of 15. So you have 1 and 15, 3 and 5. Write those out in order. 1, 3, 5 and 15. And then the highest common factor is the highest factor that is common, the same in both lists. So the highest common factor of 20 and 15 is 5. You could also do the same for the lowest common multiple. Write out the multiples of 20, the multiples of 15, and find the lowest number in each list. That approach is absolutely fine and would get you full marks unless it said use a prime factor tree. However, when the numbers get a bit bigger, that method becomes a little bit more tricky. So I'm going to do this question in the slightly more advanced way. The way you're going to do this is we're going to start by finding, doing a prime factor tree and finding the prime factors for 140. So I'll just do this here. So I could use 10 and 14. No, 10 is not prime, so I'm going to write that out as 2 and 5. Both of those are prime. I'm going to write that out as 2 and 7. Both of those are prime. So I'm going to write out 140 is the same as 2 times 2 times 5 times 7. Okay, you could write it out in index form as well. 2 squared 5 times 7. We are now, that's it done. That's that part done anyway. So now we're going to do the same for 100. So it's basically two separate questions. So if I just do a prime factor tree for this one here. So 100 is the same as 2 times 2 times 5 and times 5. And again, if you wanted to do it as in index form, that would be 2 squared times 5 squared. Okay, so now what we're going to do, if I zoom out a bit so we can see these, we are now going to do what we call it's a Venn diagram, using those prime factors. So one of the circles, two overlapping circles, and the first circle, we're going to say that's the factors of 140. The second circle, or set, is the correct name, is the factors of 100. Now we're going to use the prime factors that we've kind of figured out. Now remember, the ones in the overlap here are the ones that are common to both 140 and 100. So if I just rub that out. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to look through this list here and this list here. Any factors that appear in both of them will go in the middle, but only once. So, for example, this 2 and this 2 are common to both of them. So I'm going to cross them out and I'm going to write them in the middle once, in the overlap. We're now going to look, we've got another 2 that's common in both of them. So I'm going to write it in again, but only once. I also have a 5 in the middle, so I write that, a 5 that's common to both, so I write that in the middle once. Okay, now the 7 that's left over for the 140 is only a prime factor of 140, so I'm going to write that there. And then the 5 is what's left over to write in here. It's always worth checking. Everything in the first circle should multiply to give you 140. Everything in the second circle, including the overlap, should multiply together to give you 100. So 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 5 is 20. 20 times 7 is 140, so that one works. And in the second circle, 2 times 2 is 4. Times 5 is 20. Times 5 is 100, so that one works. Now, to find the highest common factor of these two numbers, we multiply the numbers in the overlap. So this one here, we're just going to be doing 2 times 2 times 5. 2 times 2 is 4, times 5 equals 20. So the highest common factor of 140 and 100 is 20. To find the lowest common multiple, we multiply all of the numbers. So I tend to do them in order just so I don't miss anything out. 2 times 2 times 5 times another 5 and then times that by 7. And that's going to give me times 7, 700. So the lowest common multiple of 140 and 100 is 700. That means if I wrote out my 140 times table and then I wrote out my 100 times table, the lowest number that would be the same in both lists would be 700. Okay, 2 more questions to go through. You might get a question that looks like this, where you're not told what the number is, you're just given it as a product of its prime factors. So we've got 2 numbers here, A and B. Now there's nothing wrong with working out what A is by doing 2 squared times 3 times 7. Remember I said earlier that that's the same as 3, that's the same as 7. It's just I didn't know how to do that when I was coding the question generator. So what we can do here is you could work out what those numbers are if that makes it easier. But I'm going to start. The prime factors have already been given to us. So I'm going to start by writing number A and number B. Now remember, what goes in the middle is what goes in the overlap is the factors that are common. So remember, 2 squared means 2 times 2, and 2 cubed means 2 times 2 times 2. So the ones that are common in both, we've got a 2 in both, which I'm going to write in once. Then we've got another 2 in both, which I'm going to write in again. I'm now going to do the same with the 3's, so that's just 3. And this bit means 3 times 3 times 3. So the one that's common in both is just 1, 3. And then finally, I'm going to do the same with the 7's. So that means 7. That means 7 times 7. So a 7 goes in the middle. Then we've got what's left over in each of the sets, each of the circles. So for A, I haven't got anything left over because I've crossed everything out at the top here. And you can always double check, do the numbers in the middle, i.e. all of the numbers in that set, multiply together. Do these 2 squared. We've got that 2 squared there, we've got 3 there, and we've got 7 there. So that all works. We can, however, check. We do need to put in the numbers for B as well. So with B, we had 3 2s here, but we've used 2 of them in the middle, so we need 1 more 2 there. We had 3 3s. We've put 1 of those 3s in the middle, so I can put another 2 3s here. And then finally we had 2 7s, but 1 of those we've put in the middle, so that one goes there. Now we filled in our Venn diagram, we can use it to work out the highest common factor and lowest common multiple. So the highest common factor would just be the numbers in the overlap, which if I multiplied those together, I would get 84. And the lowest common multiple is all of the numbers in set B. Sorry, all of the numbers in the whole Venn diagram, which is just 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 7 times 7. So I'm going to use a calculator. Do that one. 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 7 times 7. So the lowest common multiple of these two numbers, A and B, would be 10,584. That's it. Okay, last question, and this one's a little bit tricky. So here we are given one of the numbers. We are not, and we are told the highest common factor of 2 numbers. So we're given one of the numbers and we don't know what the other number is, that other number being x. So the way I'd approach this question is by starting with your Venn diagram. And in here, we're going to put the factors, prime factors of 10. And in here, this number is x. And we don't know what that number is yet. Okay, so you need to use what you know to fill in parts of the Venn diagram to help us. We are told that the highest common factor of 10 and x is 5. Remember from the previous examples, the highest common factor is the numbers in the overlap in the middle. So I know that the numbers in here, in this middle bit here, need to multiply together to give you 5. Now that's a prime number, so I wouldn't need to kind of break that down. Okay, one of the numbers is 10, we're told that, and we put that here. So we know that everything in this set, in this circle, needs to multiply to give me 10. So 2 times 5 would give me 10, that tells me the 2 has to go in there. Now remember, all of the numbers multiplied together. To find the lowest common multiple, we multiply all numbers in the diagram. All numbers in the diagram. So whatever number goes in here, we need to figure out what that number is. And then we could break it down into a product of its prime factors. So we know, let's call this, I'm going to call this y for a second. We know that 2 multiplied by 5 multiplied by y has to give me the lowest common multiple. But we're told what that is in the question here. That has to be 550. So we know that that one there is 550. If I just tidy this up, 2 times 5 is 10, times y would be 10y equals 550. So if I now divide both sides by 10, that will tell me that y has to be 55. So instead of y, I could now write 55. Now that's not a prime number, but you could, if you wanted to, then break that down into a product of its prime factors. So that would be 5 times 11, because 55 equals 5 times 11. If you're going to do that, remember and rub that out there. Okay, So now what we can do, we have all of the prime factors and they've been put into the Venn diagram for us. So if I just rub that out. So to find the value of x, remember, that's everything in this circle, this set, multiplied together. So x is going to be 5 times 5 times 11. So 25 times 11 is going to give me 275. So we have now found the value of x. There was quite a lot we've gone through there, but you know, it's worth practicing, especially these sorts of questions, as they are some of the more kind of applied, more tricky questions that might appear in an exam. Okay, so I have made another one of my question generators. Remember, when you open it, you might get something at the top, a yellow ribbon that says enable content or enable macros. You must click that, otherwise the buttons will not work. It's set to increasing difficulty, so these kind of go with each of the 4 examples I've just gone through as it stands. But you can change this to get a particular type of question. So example 1, example 2, 3 and 4. And then you can just get 4 questions of that difficulty. Remember I said that for your answers, if you ever get a power of 1, it just means, so for example here, that just means 5. But I couldn't get it. The extent of my coding knowledge, I couldn't figure out how to do that. You can get increased difficulty questions, or you can get, once you've got the hang of all 4 of them, you can get a mixture of them. That's really good practice because it's not any one particular type of example. It is just a mixture. That's it. I'll put a link to that file in the description so you can download that and get some practice. Thanks very much for watching. I hope it was useful. Bye bye.